Do you ever wonder if you're a narcissist? Or if sometimes maybe you just show narcissistic traits? Now, if you were abused or neglected as a child, you probably had to be self-focused in a way that other kids did not. And as an adult affected by past trauma, you might still struggle at times to handle criticism or be able to support other people when they need the attention on them. And that's actually normal, and luckily it can be healed. So how do you know if these traits that are sometimes associated with having complex PTSD veer off into actually being narcissism? Here's a video where I lay out narcissistic traits common in people with cptsd, especially when they've just started healing. Complex PTSD and narcissism are closely intertwined. They're not the same thing, but in families, narcissism in a parent can cause complex PTSD in the child. The parent might be emotionally absent or controlling or completely self-centered and have no ability to see or recognize the child's unique and good little self. And you hear all the time about how people struggle with the effects of that, a narcissistic parent, how they become wounded and vulnerable and self-attacking. But what's interesting, and what's never talked about, I think, is how often the parent's narcissistic traits or behaviors are absorbed by the child, to the point that people in the child's adult life might very much feel that they are being wounded by narcissistic behaviors. Now, it's often said that if you have the self-reflection to ask yourself, am I a narcissist? Then you're probably not a narcissist. I'm not sure if that's totally true, because you could just say those words, right? But if you're honest with yourself, you'd have to admit that of course you have some narcissistic behaviors. Everyone does. We all do. We have some tendencies, especially when cptsd is triggered. And I bring this up because these narcissistic tendencies are pretty much the elephant in the living room around why people with cptsd struggle with relationships. And none of the abuse was your fault. You did not ask for this to happen to you, but it's worth asking yourself if you're maybe sometimes driving people away with the very same narcissistic tendencies that hurt you in the first place. They're just tendencies. It's very unlikely that you actually have the personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder. Personality disorders are really hard to change. But the wounds of childhood PTSD that lead to these tendencies, they can be changed. It's not an overnight job, but they can be changed. This is flexible, and I can tell you how. But first, let's talk about some of the behaviors that show up in traumatized people. Not every symptom of cptsd looks like narcissism, but let's talk about the ones that do. So first, people with cptsd have a tendency to focus on how we feel all the time. It becomes very dominant in our consciousness to a degree that it can make it difficult to be sensitive to other people. Have you ever had that? When you're in a lot of emotional pain, it can be very easy to overlook what's going on in your companion's day, what's going on in their life. And I had a period in my life where like 3 close family members died in less than a year. Also, I got attacked on the street during that time, and I got dumped, and some other bad things happened. And I was drowning in sorrow. I was drowning in overwhelm, and my PTSD symptoms were just taking over my brain. I was barely able to read or have a conversation. I'd be on the phone talking, and I couldn't even remember who I was talking to sometimes. I was really struggling. And I got the feedback from a friend at that time, that I was being very self-centered. And it made me mad at the time because I couldn't really do better than that at the time. I was very self-centered. I was in deep shock and woundedness. But for the record, it was helpful to know that for other people, it wasn't like having a two-way friendship, right? So if we get stuck in our trauma and we can't have a two-way friendship, that's one reason why we could end up feeling kind of isolated from people, because very few people want to sign up for that, for a relationship where we do all the talking, where we are the designated person who needs to be cared for today. Most people want something a little more mutual, or certainly in a healthy relationship they do. Okay, second thing, we can get very focused on how other people think about us. And these are subtle signs, right? And everybody tends to focus on what other people think about them. But what I noticed about cptsd in myself and as I teach other people, I teach this technique, like the foundation of what I teach to help people heal their symptoms has to do with writing down fearful and resentful thoughts about other people. And those thoughts, sometimes I'm attacking myself, but a lot of times I have fear what other people think about me. I have fear they think that I'm stupid, old, fat, no good, not lovable. They're not including me. And especially early in my healing process, I was really burdened with these ideas. And in effect, it's like I'm sort of thinking about myself, but it's all about like, what do other people think of me? Why haven't they started treating me nicer yet? Why do they keep triggering me? Why can't they change their behavior so life would be easier for me? And in a way, that is a focus on how other people think of us. And I bring that up because it's one of the hallmarks of a narcissist, is that they are very focused on other people and whether other people make things good for them, at the expense of thinking about what do other people need and what's the reciprocal arrangement there. So this is sort of a subset of the first point I made. Okay, third point. When we're symptomatic with cptsd, we have a belief that our problems are so unique that no one can possibly understand. I hear this all the time when I coach people. They go, well, I have problems you couldn't possibly understand. Now, here's the thing about me. I have problems. They're not as bad as some people's. They're worse than other people's. The stuff that I went through in the past was pretty bad, and I don't talk about 90% of it because part of my healing program is, if you take my courses, you'll get some highlights of the bad stuff that happened. But for me to talk about it all the time would really be a bummer for you. It'd be a bummer for me. It would focus on the problem. You know the problem. You have the problem. I focus on talking about the solution. So when people come to me and think that I know somehow what PTSD is like, and I know somehow how to calm the symptoms, but I couldn't possibly understand the problem, that's not always true. Of course, some people have had experiences that I have not had, for better and worse. In the case of certain abusive situations, yes, I'm very grateful I didn't go through what some people went through. But I've had people say stuff like, well, I have to move. I have to move and I'm sick right now and have to go to the doctor. You couldn't possibly understand. It's like, oh my gosh, you think I don't know what it's like? I've had 14 surgeries and was in and out of the hospital. See, it's like a competition. It's not a competition. So when I get into trying to convince somebody I do understand, that's also like a game I don't want to play. And that's why I just want to call out that thing where you go, my problems are so unique, nobody could understand. Now, I agree, when you have cptsd, a lot of people don't understand. They don't understand the nature of it, and they cannot understand why we don't just fix our problems. It's like, why do you keep getting together with the same kind of jerk? Why do you keep overreacting? Why don't you just not overreact? It's so simple for them, right? But we understand each other. More or less, we understand. And I'm calling it out as a narcissistic tendency to just think that your problems are so much worse than anybody else's. I know you know objectively that there are many, many people who have worse problems and who actually handled them okay. And I will just point out to you that every individual is different. You can put like X amount of trauma on this person and this person. One of them will develop complex PTSD and one person will sail right through it. You do it to a third person and they end up, their whole life just collapses and they can't deal with it at all. We're all different. And so there's no point in making comparisons about your troubles and your grief and your solutions. What helps is when you're talking to other people is to look for commonality, look for what you can learn from other people's experience. And what a relief it is when you meet somebody who has been through something similar and who does understand. I went through high school thinking I was the only kid who lived in a chaotic home, and I tried not to tell anybody. A few of my close friends had been to my house and they kind of saw the outward signs of it. And I went to a high school, like a 30-something year high school reunion. Because when I left the town where I went to high school, I graduated a year early and I left and I never came back. I had a lot of shame, was part of the reason I never came back, but I finally went back. I was healed enough and I went back and I connected with people, and I was really surprised how much I liked my former friends and how much we felt connected to each other. And when we really got to talking, we found out that all of us in my group of girls that I was tight friends with in 7th, 8th, 9th grade, all of us had a parent who had an addiction or alcoholism or had died. So we all had been dealing with kind of a major loss of a parent. and a lot of the craziness of addiction and alcoholism at home. And none of us were talking about it at the time. And then we got together and we talked about it, and it explained so much. So it is good to be with people who understand. It's also good to be comfortable with people who don't have your experience. They may never understand your wounds, but you can learn so much from people who were less traumatized. So keep an open mind. It's a narcissistic tendency to just think my problems are special. You know, people have to conform to my problems or they don't count. That is a narcissistic thought. And we don't want to go there. We want to heal from those tendencies. All right, the next narcissistic tendency that you sometimes see in CPTSD is a strong victim identity. And this comes up in narcissistic personality disorder. For us, you know, there really was some victimization. And for the record, a lot of people who have narcissistic personality disorder were very traumatized as kids. It may have played a role. It's not the only cause, but it can play a role in why people end up with that personality disorder. So that doesn't mean that it excuses the behavior in them or in us. So the strong victim identity, you were abused, you were neglected, or you wouldn't be on this channel. So you were a victim, but I'm going to encourage you not to let it be your identity. All discomfort and shame that you feel is no longer caused by other people or the past. That's kind of my radical statement here. If you're still having discomfort and shame around other people, what's going on is some present time fear and resentment about that, and that is coming from here. And before you get all offended that I think that I'm saying like, oh, it's all your fault, you create your reality, I'm never saying that. You were abused and neglected. It caused problems. You're having trouble moving on from being completely held down by the problems that causes. Most people will be held down for life. We're here, I'm trying to teach you how to not be held down for life, how to get free. And I'm not saying you deny that you were victimized in the past, but I want you to get in touch with your new identity, which is that you're no longer a victim, or you're learning not to be one, right? Because, I mean, a lot of us continue to get victimized because that pattern was laid down in us. But we can learn. We have a brain and we're adults and we're free. And with a little bit of persistence and learning, we can begin to change that pattern. And then we're not a victim. Another victim format that you'll see in CPTSD people and narcissists is I'm the long-suffering victim. I'm so nice all the time, but everyone on the planet is just awful, and they're mean to me for no reason. And I'm kind of making fun of that, because if you think that you're the only nice person on the planet, you actually might have narcissistic personality disorder. None of us is the only nice person on the planet. We're like everybody. We have a mix of good and bad traits. And like everybody else, we do better when we work on healing the bad traits and the vulnerabilities, and we play off the strengths. We got to love ourselves as we are. But we're not the only good person in the world, and there are many good people out there. And just like there's people who suffer more than we do, there's people who do good things on a scale that any one of us can only like guess at, like we don't even know. And honestly, if we've spent a lot of our lives kind of held down by trauma, we didn't have a chance to shine. We didn't have a chance to bring our gifts to bear. And that is why it's so important now to heal, because if your gifts, which are in there, you were given gifts, if trauma came in and stopped you from fulfilling those, from becoming your real self and bringing to the world all the good that you have in you, if that got thwarted by trauma, that's terrible. That is the tragedy. That is, I think, that the deepest, most burning source of depression and sort of discouragement is just knowing that you're capable of so much more, but you can't do it. You get so tripped up on things. So you're here, you're watching this video now, and together, that's what we do. We learn to not get tripped up over those things. We learn to sail through them. We learn to handle them so that we continue to be ourselves, so that we can be real and honest about who we are. The next narcissistic trait. People with CPTSD, I speak for all of us, we can be arrogant sometimes. We think we know how other people should live or how they should think or what they need to change about themselves. And that, in effect, is putting ourselves above them, thinking that we know more than they do. That is the very definition of arrogance, and it's very often misguided and cruel. It pushes people away, to say the least, when we do that. And so you want to check that. It's a very natural thing, and especially if you grew up with trauma, your life may be heavily populated by people with serious problems. When we think we know what somebody else ought to do, and we start saying, you know, honey, I've been through this before, here's what you do, you got to read this book, you got to eat this, you got to not drink that, we're putting ourselves above other people. And sometimes they might want that help. They might be turning to somebody who has that experience. But if they're not, what it feels like is control and arrogance. And it causes them to want to push us away. At its very worst, that kind of control can go to the extreme of being, you know, misguided pressure, and it can be cruel. It comes off as criticism. So if you feel like you're just trying to be helpful to people and you're finding that they're not receptive, that's something you could ask yourself is, do I do that? Am I giving them advice in a way that makes them feel a little bit criticized or a little bit, you know, like I'm trying to control them? And it can come as a surprise how little you need to do that to influence other people. The best thing you can do if you want to influence other people is to just do really well yourself, to solve your own problems and to show up happy and free in front of them. And then they might ask you one day, how did you do that? But I'll tell you, you know, of all the healing I've ever had, people have rarely spontaneously asked me for advice or changed their life because I sort of rushed in with a solution for them. More what happened was I sort of, you know, used my solution and changed my life, and people began to ask. And I suppose when you come find me on YouTube, that's a form of asking. You can watch the video or you can turn it off, but I'm not pushing you to do anything I say. In fact, I tell people all the time, when I give advice about how to deal with this thing called cptsd, put it on the front porch of how you listen to things. Don't bring it right into your house. Just listen to what it is. See if you agree with it. See if you think you can use it. And don't take it with a grain of salt, because it's my experience. And the best thing you can do is use your experience. Another narcissistic tendency that we sometimes have in cptsd is we have a hard time seeing our own role in our problems. Not just in that we, you know, think that we're innocent victims and blame other people, but also we have trouble realizing that we have agency. We do have the capacity to discover what's going on in our lives and to change it. It's not easy, and some things are very difficult to change, but we have agency. So that tendency to think, oh, you know, everybody else just controls everything and they make everything bad for me and I can't do anything, that is like a narcissistic tendency. So when we think that other people control things and we can't, what we're basically doing is we're taking our standard allotment of power, which is about like everybody else's. Everybody has some power over themselves. We're taking that and we're giving it to somebody else. And in fact, when we give it to people who abused us and say, well, I was abused, so I can never change, we're taking that power and we're giving it to these people who hurt us in the first place. And further, we sometimes tend to believe that they did it because they targeted us. And that is occasionally what somebody does. A very bad person might target another person for abuse. Most abuse happens by people who are overwhelmed and too messed up inside their own head. Maybe they're narcissists, maybe they have cptsd, but they're getting overwhelmed and this bad behavior is coming out. So it's not always a product of targeting. And I think believing that all abuse was targeted at you is a form of giving your power away, because it's a way of not seeing that even though you had cptsd and even though you might not have been able to see it coming, given the information and the strength that you had at the time, you couldn't have done anything about it. You can learn from it and maybe handle such a situation differently next time. I think that people over-assign targeting as the cause of somebody's abuse. Targeting is something that you don't have much control over, do you? You have less control. Whatever you do, however you interpret what happened to you, try to see if, given what you know now about cptsd and about yourself and other people, is there a way that you could protect yourself from that happening again without having to cut everybody out of your life, without having to make everybody on the planet bad? To try to keep your heart open. Your heart is going to play a big role in you becoming your real self. So you shutting your heart down, you cutting people off, it's not a good solution to the problem of CPTSD. It's a temporary solution. It's a temporary solution and it saved you, and that's great. But now we're going to help you open your heart again. There's a similarity here in that a person feels too fragile to hear criticism. And I think in the case of narcissism, a person cannot be messed with in this belief that they're perfect and above everything. A person with CPTSD is fragile just worrying that they're worthy enough to deserve to be part of the human race, right? There's a real low self-esteem there. Criticism takes on a power that it really doesn't have. It takes on a power in the ears of a person with CPTSD to be very destructive, and that mirrors a narcissistic tendency. And it's not a good one to have. We need a coping mechanism to deal with criticism sometimes so that it doesn't get in, so that we can keep it on the front porch of our listening and not let it into the house. And consider, is it good criticism? Is it something we need to hear and can learn from? Or is it just junk that somebody's throwing at us? That's the case sometimes. Another narcissistic tendency, we are drawn to troubled people who are less functional than we are sometimes, and who see us as bigger, better, smarter, more successful, the leader, or even the savior. People who have narcissism want to be surrounded by people who look up to them. I've noticed that people with CPTSD tend to sort of split it and have difficulty with equal relationships sometimes. So there's always one person is up or down. I've certainly noticed that before I was healing, that my relationships were all either I was kind of the person who had more power or the other person was. And either I was getting resented or I was doing the resenting. So unequal relationships have a place in the world, and that would be normal with a parent and a child, or an employer and a worker. You know, somebody's in charge there. So there's a place for that. But of course, for our closest relationships, we want to have the capacity for equal relationships. Part of healing is to develop comfort to have that. And equal relationships have a whole lot of level of communication that can be tricky with CPTSD. And I think that's why there's an attraction to unequal relationships, because you don't even have that you don't really have to work out certain fine, nuanced problems. It's just like, well, the boss says, you know, this is how we're going to solve this problem. So it's a way of skipping over the part that's complicated. As you heal, that's going to get easier for you. So that's something you might want to look at in your life. Another narcissistic tendency, we sometimes make big sweeping accusations at people. We say stuff like, you know, education is just brainwashing for the masses, or religion is all about social control. These things are not true. Those are resentful, big sweeping statements. Another one you hear all the time is, everyone I know is a narcissist. But of course I'm not. I'm exempt from this. And that sort of sweeping declaration is a narcissistic tendency. If you pay attention to reality, of course not everyone is a narcissist. And I see this particularly in YouTube comments, people who just say, it's a terrible world out there, nobody cares about other people anymore. And we know when we read those comments, they're talking about their experience, they're having a terrible experience, and it feels like it's everybody. But that's what happens with CPTSD, is that kind of thinking can calcify, and ultimately that's a very self-centered and narcissistic style thought. You know, I'm the only good person, everybody out there is bad. It puts us above everybody, and, you know, of course nobody likes it. It pushes people away. And usually it's said by people who have already resigned themselves to that by declaring, everybody's bad, I'm going to isolate myself, it's the only way. And I think some people's PTSD is so bad that that is for now the best solution there is. But I'm here for anybody who's ready to take that next step and try to reconnect with people, you know, to help look at the behaviors that get in the way, including these narcissist style behaviors that you may have inherited. Now here's one. I don't think this is as common as some of the other ones, but it's a narcissistic tendency, and it's a sense of entitlement, where we believe that other people are sort of like the grown-ups and they're responsible to make our lives better or make the world better and even pay for everything like housing, food, therapy. And this reflects an unhealthy belief that we have a special status as people who are just damaged and have to be taken care of, but who don't have any obligation to other people. And so we very easily see the obligation of some people towards people like ourselves. We don't see our obligation right back. And I totally understand, and I've been the person who could not fulfill certain obligations because what was happening in my life was too great. But there have been other times when I had the joy of sort of stepping up a little bit and becoming one of those people And I really want to put it out there that whether you can do it in a big way or a small way, when you rise up to start bringing that goodness that you're holding latent in you under the cptsd, when you start to bring it into the world, you're going to feel a joy, you're going to feel a freedom, you're going to feel a power that you never could have had when you were waiting for other people to solve your problems for you. We all need help sometimes, but in every little way that you can, see what you can do to become that person, even if it's in a tiny way, helping somebody who lives on your street, all right? Few things in relationships can drain your energy and your personal power like narcissistic abuse. By definition, when a cult leader controls and brainwashes people who fall under their spell, it's called narcissistic abuse. And so many good, intelligent people are vulnerable to that, to someone taking charge of their life in a way that it feels great at first, like it solves all your problems. But then it turns into a soul-sucking nightmare. And the same thing can happen in relationships. The luring in, it's going to be great, then the deprivation, the mindfuckery, the introduction of greater and greater emotional abuse. At that point, a vital sense of self-interest, your instinct for self-preservation can be so damaged, you can't imagine leaving. My letter today is from a woman I'll call Freya, and she writes, "Hey Anna, I would like to ask for your help because this situation has been dragging on for so long. I'm 23 years old and just enrolled in university. I have cptsd from an emotionally unavailable, strict mother and an alcoholic father who cheated on my mother. I met a guy almost 2 years ago when I was in a very vulnerable period in my life. I was having frequent panic attacks. I was jobless because of that and was living with a friend at that time. The guy came as a, quote, savior. It felt like he dragged me out of the mud. We started dating only after 2 months. He encouraged me to apply for university, get better habits, see a therapist, stop smoking, and even have a better relationship with God, as we're both Christian. It was all good until about 6 months into the relationship. I started feeling overpowered. Like what I said did not matter. My needs getting frequently dismissed, such as asking for more affection, validation. I played the cool girl, but got tired of it very quickly. My partner wouldn't kiss me. He would reject hugs even, saying it was for my own benefit. He felt like my need for affection was unhealthy. I felt like a parent and a child simultaneously, being guilt-tripped into doing chores for him, such as cleaning or washing the dishes, because he had eczema, but being treated as a child, always told what to do. I felt like my voice, my opinions did not matter. He said it was unhealthy for me to wear makeup or drink coffee, and he would pick fights over those things. After a year into the relationship, he ended up breaking up with me, saying I was too obsessed with the idea of the relationship and I'm too immature to be in one. I asked for no contact, but he wanted me to stay close, and I submitted, hoping we might be together one day. He said he would not want the advances of other girls and only did this to help me and better our friendship. But I found out he messaged a girl some sexual things after a friend of his warned me about some strange messages he and the girl exchanged on social media. He tried to deny it, but after I talked to the girl myself, it was very clear to me he pretended to be someone he wasn't. They did exchange sexual messages, and that moment, I was done. I blocked him everywhere and avoided physical contact as well. Since then, he tried reaching out from multiple numbers, apologizing, saying he has found new faith. It was the first time he said I was beautiful. He said he loved me, wants me, and only me, and that he was not connected to his heart. After not talking for weeks, he showed up in my hometown uninvited. He brought me a cake he made for me and brought me other very personal gifts. I caught feelings again. I caught feelings. Like catching an STD. Oh. But later on, he told me he doesn't want a relationship for now. After he told me that, I cut contact again. He reached out from a new number, trying to tell me I'm wrong for damaging my heart like this, that I can't forgive and that I will cause myself hurt in the future. I just want this to end. I cannot seem to let him go 100%, even though I feel this is not real love. How do I know I'm making the right decision? I feel like I'm in his grip or under a spell. Thank you in advance. Freya. Okay, Freya. I had my fairy pencil. I was circling things I wanted to come back to as I read through. I'm so glad you wrote. And there it is. You want to know, did you make the right decision? Yes, and I'll tell you why. It's been dragging on. You're 23 years old. You just enrolled in university. You have cptsd, emotionally unavailable strict mother, alcoholic father, cheated on your mother. Sounds like just lies and no mirroring of presence of like helping you understand what feelings and perceptions mean. They damaged your perception. They primed you. They made you vulnerable for exactly what has happened, okay? So you were having frequent panic attacks. You had no job because of that. You were living with a friend. So very vulnerable. Now, I wrote down a list of vulnerable characteristics. This is a good time to read them. So I've been thinking a lot about cult leaders and spiritual abuse. And I know, like, this guy, I think it is spiritual abuse. He was using the sort of Christianity thing. But whatever it is, whatever you call it, he tried to hang it on 20 different hooks. Very interesting, but not cool. I don't diagnose anybody, but he just seems like bullet point, textbook, Wikipedia, narcissist who's a psychopath. Everything seems manipulation. So I can't diagnose, but those of you who comment, you can say anything you want. So you go for it. You please help Freya know what this is so she knows what to do some research on. Okay. So I got this list from Spiritual Abuse Resources, and they're an organization. You can find them online. These are the vulnerable characteristics that make somebody an easy target for narcissistic abuse and or spiritual abuse, okay? So it's someone who is under stress, which you were having panic attacks, in transition, you were jobless, you didn't have a direction in your life yet, tend toward dependency, you were living towards friends, and so you were very young and you hadn't really gotten to that point where you were independent yet, tend toward dependency, unassertive, gullible, want simple answers to complex questions. A lot of these are characteristics of youth. Are attracted to trance-like states of mind. Are unaware of how groups can manipulate people. Have recently had a traumatic experience. Are unaware of how the mind and body can affect each other. Lack skills in critical thinking and logic, and lack knowledge about methods of deception. So I just thought I'd share that with you because I was thinking a lot about that list. I've been planning to make a video about it, but I'm, doing my research. But I thought I'd just pull out that list because, Freya, I just hear it in your story. That you were vulnerable. It's not your fault you were vulnerable. I mean, the minute people don't get taken care of properly as children, it sets you up for this kind of thing. So the really positive thing is you're out right now, you're asking for input, you're asking for advice. This is all really positive things. Yes, you can heal. It takes vigilance, it takes persistence, but you can do it. He came along, this guy, as a savior. Classic narcissist move. And it felt like he dragged you out of the mud. And when you were in the mud, so any kind of love and attention would have felt that way, right? And of course, when we look at somebody we're newly dating as a savior and it's going to solve all of our problems, it does set us up for grave disappointment because nobody can really do that. A relationship can be a positive thing and it can introduce a whole new set of friends and a purpose in life and totally good things. I don't deny that. But when you were in the mud and suddenly everything's been solved, vulnerable, okay. Healthy people will not try to convince you that they're the solution to all your problems either. So you got into a relationship, you were dating within 2 months, and he encouraged you to do these positive things, apply to university, get better habits, see a therapist, stop smoking, have a better relationship with God. it was all good until about 6 months into the relationship. So whatever, I could only, you guys who are out there in the comment section, you can tell me the significance of 6 months, but I just think it's when sexual interest wears off and the really nasty side, there's no holds barred anymore. There's nothing for them to get from you. Just the need to control somebody else and to feed off that energy. All right, so you started feeling overpowered, and I get it from what you said. What you said didn't matter. Your needs were frequently dismissed. If you asked for more affection or validation, no. You played the cool girl, and I love that term. We're going to have shirts here one day that say ex-cool girl, acting like, oh, that's fine. I don't need affection and validation. Yeah, that's needy. That's pathetic, or whatever he was telling you. He said he wouldn't give that to you. No hugs, no kisses. It was for your own benefit because your need for affection was unhealthy. Oh my gosh, that's where I say mindfuckery. What does that even mean? It was unhealthy to need that. I think it was inconvenient because, I'm gonna just, spoiler alert, like what's with all the phone numbers, okay? Something very nefarious is going on here. Felt like a child and a parent simultaneously, guilt-tripped into doing all his chores. That's a very cult leader thing. That's how you show your loyalty. And then treated as a child where he told you what to do. You felt like your voice and your opinions didn't matter. Well, he tried to make them that way, but they do matter. So you were made to feel that way, and because you were vulnerable and he was manipulative, and that's where it goes. But it's not true. So I just want to say that, for any credence that you give me, your voice and your opinions totally matter, and I'm so glad you're getting them back enough to say what happened here. He said it was unhealthy to wear makeup or drink coffee. What the heck? And he would pick fights over those things. Okay, that's like crazy controlling. After a year in the relationship, he broke up, saying you were too obsessed with the idea of a relationship. Oh my gosh, that's like classic sleeping with other people and lying that it's somehow good rhetoric. He said you were too immature to be in one. Yeah, blame you. You're young, so in a way, I give him no, he's not right about this, but just that, none of us are perfectly formed for relationships. And so, especially in early 20s, weird stuff happens when we grew up with trauma. We often don't have the boundaries or the discernment and can't see the red flags and get very confused when people are abusive to us. Like, did I cause that? That's what we do, but that's why we're here, because we're healing from that. Okay. So you asked for no contact, but he wanted me to stay close, and you submitted. That word submit, ouch. Hoping we might be together one day. Okay, so yeah, you were in a deep trauma bond. I hope he comes around and loves me. I know. And he said he would not want the advances of other girls. And I don't want that with other girls. He just does that with other girls. And you found out he messaged, sexual stuff. Some friend warned you and you saw it. And when you heard it was other girls, like, for whatever reason, you couldn't have a boundary and the self-esteem to realize that everything that had happened up to that point was terrible. But the fact that he lied to you about another girl, that was finally what snapped you out of it. So good. Thank you, other girl. Thank you. Thank you for existing and for making it clear to our friend Freya here that this was not good. That was the thing that was clear to you. And it's interesting because there was that, like, your dad cheated on your mom thing, and it's just weird how sometimes the karma of the stuff we witnessed and suffered from as a child comes back and repeats. And that's what we're doing in recovery is, we're just sort of breaking the repetition, not by just going, I'm so bad, I repeat it, I'm going to decide not to repeat it. It's so subtle the way it creeps in. And it creeps in, I've found, through the very minute, little fearful and resentful thoughts that become beliefs that start driving the trauma-driven decisions and behavior that carries us down the road of ruin, frankly. I don't mean to be Victorian about it, but my cptsd symptoms ruined my life until I began to use these techniques to really get to those very subtle little thoughts and just keep moving them out. Those techniques I call the daily practice. It's a free course that's always down below in the description section. Also on the free tools page of my website, crappychildhoodfairy.com. If you want to take that, 500 people sign up for it a day. It's really popular. Come join us. It's see if it works, okay? So you blocked him everywhere and avoided physical contact. I laughed a little bit. It's not funny, but if you block somebody on social media, I hope you avoided physical contact. So you were trying to have no contact. And I know how hard that is for somebody who's been trauma bonded and who's been neglected in childhood. That kind of a boundary and the loneliness that's coming up, even when you're blocking somebody who abuses you, it can be so compelling that you just break your own boundaries, because you can't bear it. But you're doing it. Okay. And then once you blocked him, he tried reaching out from multiple numbers. I just circled that a bunch of times. It's like multiple numbers. What's going on? He has burner phones for something, for shady business, or for having different relationships with different people. I mean, that would explain why your emotional feelings for him were a problem, a problem for him. And he apologized, saying he found new faith. I'm just guessing like that's what you were hoping to hear. Of course he clocked what it is that you wanted to hear, and he said those things. And it was the first time he said you were beautiful. Oh God, trauma bonding. You were with a guy a year and he never said that, and then he says it and you're like, wait, maybe it's love now. I totally get it. Of course, when we read it out loud, you can see, of course not, it's manipulation. And this is called hoovering, by the way, when a narcissist just, they just like, everything that you ever wanted to hear and suck you back into their orbit, right? And it worked a little bit. And he said he loved you and you're the only one for him. And at the time, all that bad stuff happened because he wasn't connected to his heart. I just would lay money that those are the words that you used when you were saying what hurt you about it. So he parroted it back to you. I suspect he has no idea what those feelings are or what it means. He's just saying what you're supposed to say to get Freya to put down her boundaries. Then you didn't talk to him. You still had a boundary. Then he comes to your town with a cake. A man who made a cake. How irresistible is that? I totally get it. He's wearing you down, right? And personal gifts. So that phrase, I chuckled the first time. I caught feelings again. And I think that maybe where you live, that's just a way it said, like, I would say, like, I started having feelings again, but I caught feelings. It just sounds like a disease, and it is in this case. It's like a virus that just got in there and made you think thoughts like this is a good idea. I've had that virus. But later, then he said, guess what? He doesn't want a relationship. So he did all that. You sort of opened up to him. No, he doesn't want one for now. For now, bookmark placed there. And then he told you that, so you cut contact again. Then he used a new telephone number. This guy just cracks me up. What's with all the numbers? Somebody in the audience is going to tell us here in the comments, like, what's with all the numbers? What's he actually doing? And he's trying to tell you that you're wrong for damaging your own heart like this. What, by cutting him off? That you can't forgive, that's your problem, right? And that you'll cause yourself hurt in the future. And I just want, he's grasping at straws to find a way to like, try to get you to let him in again. And saying basically anything, no matter how hurtful. And you just want it to end. Okay, we're going to help you do that. You haven't let him go 100%. And that's what we do. We cannot let go of the hope, especially when it's just been all like it's just been so worked up in us, like, I want that love, and you don't get it, and then you're given a little crumb, and you're like, yes, I'm getting a crumb, I think the whole cake is coming again, but it's not coming. The cake is taken away, and every time you're given this tiny little thing, it's taken away, and it wears down your will, your spirit, your confidence, your self-esteem, your boundaries, and that is the goal. That's what he wants. He wants somebody just who's all effed up, and so he can just like, this is a figure of speech, but he's drinking your blood. He's an emotional vampire, all right? So you say, I can't let go even though I feel this is not real love. And I'm just going to say understatement of the year. It's not even fake love. This is like some sort of terrible exploitation of a person. And only because you were neglected and abused as a kid, only because of that could you possibly crap fit this into thinking, well, it's something like love. It's nothing like love. Love, by definition, is somebody who cares about the best for you. I wanted to share with you a resource here. If you're wondering if you made the right decision, Richard Grannon, who is on YouTube, who talks about cptsd a lot, his thing is narcissistic abuse. I really encourage you, go check out his channel. I'll put a link down below in the description section. He has a new book out called A Cult of One. And I heard that title and I bought it immediately, and it's on its way. It just makes so much sense, and that's what it sounds like you were in, a cult of one. This dude is, it's brainwashing, it's mind control, it's exploitation, it's everything like being in a cult. And Richard Grannon says he had to choose a word for who, if the other person is a narcissistic abuser, what am I? And I just wanted to quote from his book here. He says, I chose the term codependent. In using this term, I'm going a little beyond the boundaries of the way it's typically used. When I use the term codependent, I mean a person who is traumatized and brainwashed into needing to be a slave to abusive, psychopathic, narcissistic, tyrannical types of people and systems in order to feel in any way meaningful, visible, or alive. All right? So, peeps, you might want to check out Richard Grannon's new book. It looks fabulous, and I can't wait to read it. Some people with childhood PTSD have a lot of room to recover from their parents' abuse when they were little. But for some adults who were abused as a child, manipulative parents, they just keep the abuse alive. And it would be so much easier if you could recognize abuse for what it is and be clear about it and either cut that person out of your life or just see clearly that their tactics are crazy and they're abusive. But when the abuse involved dismissiveness of your feelings and your safety, the trauma wound in you by its very nature makes it hard for you not to dismiss your feelings and what you need. It makes it hard for you to take yourself seriously or to know what you even should take seriously. Like if your parents didn't teach you how to do that, it just didn't develop. And now it's for you to figure out as an adult, and thank goodness, whatever you went through as a kid, this is possible. You can teach yourself now. My letter today is from a woman I'll call Rose, and she has asked for a reality check about a very worrying note she got from her mom. And she writes, Hi, Anna. After a lifetime of being dismissed and being told my feelings were wrong, I have a hard time discerning reality. I'm going to circle that. Got my fairy pencil. We're going to read through this one time, and I'll circle what I want to come back to, and then we'll go through again. I'll see if I can help you, Rose. Okay. I had a physically abusive dad who lost custody of me when I was 7. I realized I've been dealing with a lifetime of emotional abuse from my mom when recently she threatened to take her own life after I confronted her about her dismissiveness toward me. Whoa, okay. In family therapy, she said the suicide threat was a joke that she learned from her former coworkers when times get stressful. The last family session we had together, she spent literally screaming at me. The therapist was too overwhelmed to intervene, and that's when I decided to stop family therapy, distance myself, just to focus on my own individual healing. My biggest resentment I have toward her is her not protecting me when I came to her for help after her boyfriend molested me. I was a preteen, and he touched me inappropriately when tucking me into bed. She happened to be standing behind him at the time it happened, but she, quote, didn't see. I confronted her the following day, and she told me that didn't happen, and she proceeded to invite him into our lives for the next 6 years. Letting go of the resentment and finding forgiveness has been my biggest struggle in my healing process. Recently, my mom sent a group message to me and my fiance that left me feeling dysregulated. It read, Sam and Rose, I hope you're both doing well and that the wedding planning is going smoothly. I wanted to wait until all the tests were done and an indefinite diagnosis was confirmed. But I also didn't want to regret not saying my goodbyes just in case. I've been suffering persistent, painful headaches and dizziness going on day 6 now, in which I was bedridden in the first 3 days. Urgent care doctor wanted to rule out stress versus brain tumor or aneurysm in the head and scheduled me for an MRI for tomorrow. Meanwhile, my symptoms persist while I'm working more hours to support 3 dev teams. Rose, I'd said that I couldn't go back in time to undo the hurts that I had unintentionally caused you in your childhood for doing what I thought was right at the time, given what I had and could. I had attempted to correct my actions and responses, but they weren't good enough nor acceptable. Hence, we are at where we are now, a total disconnection. Nevertheless, I will always love you and forgive everything that you have said and done that brought me heartache and sadness. Sam, okay, this is the fiance. Sam, you are an extraordinary, loving, caring, and considerate human being that I have ever met in my life. I'm so thankful and proud that you're going to be my future son-in-law. You will be a wonderful husband to Rose and an amazing father to your children. Thank you for making our lives so joyful. I will never ever forget all the little things that you had said and done to and for me. I've already loved you and celebrated you as the son I wish to have ever since you two were committed to each other. Love always, Mom. So then Rose says, my gut tells me this is a cry for attention. But as I mentioned earlier, I have a hard time trusting my perception. To me, the message felt unapologetic, guilting, blame shifting, and manipulative. I would appreciate your take on this and your suggestions on how to proceed. Thank you for all you do, Rose. Oh, Rose. I'm telling you, I had trouble keeping a straight face. And normally I don't read letters out loud where I am not able to talk about them respectfully. And so I'm sort of walking a tightrope here. I want to respect the situation, and I respect you tremendously. Congratulations on getting married and on having some distance between this. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, let's go through the letter. You asked. I'm going to go through this and tell you what I heard. All right. A lifetime of being dismissed and being told your feelings are wrong. Yes. Oh my gosh. I believe you, Rose. I believe you. I believe you. That is what happened. There are just so many. Now, as a rule, I believe the people who write to me. And if I take your letter, if I didn't believe somebody, that could be a reason I don't take their letter. I don't want people, I can't answer all the letters. That's not why. But occasionally I just think, ooh, somebody doesn't really have perspective here. So I always have an open mind, like maybe Rose doesn't have perspective on this. Maybe she's taking this too hard. But it was the letter from your mom that made it so clear, like, you are not tripping, Rose. This is like crazy talk. Okay. You had a physically abusive dad, and he lost custody of you when you were 7. That right there. Well, at least he lost custody of you. At least that left your life, but still you didn't have a dad then. And you realized that you've been dealing with a lifetime of emotional abuse from your mom. Recently, she threatened to kill herself after you confronted her about her dismissiveness toward you. That is like textbook bad parenting. You talk to her about her dismissing you, which is in any relationship, you're going to have to talk about hurts, right? If it's going to get better. And then she says she needs to die. So I can't diagnose anybody. I'm not a therapist and I don't know your mom, but I'll just tell you, it sure sounds like a classical bullet point definition if you Google narcissism. I got a criticism, so I have to die. Yeah. Then she said, in family therapy, oh, that was just a joke. And she learned it from some coworkers that she used to work with. What? How confusing. No, it's not a joke. It's not funny. I sure hope the therapist said something about it. You didn't really describe that, but you did say that the whole session she spent literally screaming at you about something. So she doesn't sound like somebody who's capable of working out problems or listening or, trying to find a solution to anything. It sounds like she's somebody utterly bubbled in with her own emotions and desires and thoughts. And that, I'm sad to say that she can't see you or hear you. It's like you don't really exist. So the therapist was too overwhelmed to intervene. And I could see how that would happen with somebody screaming. I'm sorry you went through that. You put your good faith that you would get some help and they couldn't. That's when you decided to stop family therapy. Okay, good. Distance yourself and just focus on your own individual healing. Yay, Rose, you go. That's the way. You got it. All right. My biggest resentment I have toward her is her not protecting me when I came to her for help after her boyfriend molested me. I have kids, and I will tell you, if that had ever happened, this is the thing. There's stuff that happened to me when I was a kid. My parents had some good points, some bad points, But I couldn't really see it fully until I had my own kids. This might happen to you if you decide to have kids. I couldn't really see like what it takes to actually, like for a parent to turn their back on a child who is being harmed in that way and not deal with it. Like once I had my own kids, I was just floored. Like, I literally cannot imagine how anybody could allow that to happen. I felt so, concerned about them. And so my heart was just so extended to them. And are they okay? And how was that for them? And of course, occasionally some bad things happen to them. And then trying to help them navigate that. I would never, ever do that. And so for me, I just would say any parent who turns their back and brings a boyfriend in for 6 years who just molested their child right in front of them. And okay, let's say she's not lying and she didn't see it, but you told her the next day that you were a preteen. So what, you were 11 or 12 or something? And you told her this happened? Like, kids don't tend to lie about this. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Rose, this is just terrible. She didn't believe you. Or she didn't see it. And you even, first of all, I just want to give you a hug and say, as an 11 or 12-year-old or whatever you were, you told her, you stood up for yourself. That is such a good part of you that knows that that wasn't supposed to happen. You did not internalize that. This is your strength, okay? You recognize this is her. This is her failing you. And you did not fail yourself. You didn't fail yourself. You told her. So you confronted her and she said, that didn't happen. That just bothers me so much. Then he lived with you guys for 6 years. Gosh, I hope he didn't keep messing with you. You go right into saying, letting go of resentment and finding forgiveness has been my biggest struggle in my healing process. I'll say, you know what? I just want to say, like, the idea of letting go of resentment and finding forgiveness, like that's really good. And I want to tell you something. I've said this before. You might want to think of these things. Now, resentment is something that I teach people how to get free of through the daily practice exercises I teach. If anybody's interested, fear, resentment, it's like too much for you and you feel like it's distorting your reality, which is basically what cptsd is like. There's a link to that course. It's free. It's down in the description section in every video I make. But letting go of resentment when she's still actively manipulating you and trying to just like mind F you into her little story of how she's great and you're the problem. I don't know. Forgiveness. Okay, so here's my concept of forgiveness. Sometimes forgiveness arrives in our hearts, but I don't think that when somebody is actively abusing you, that you are obliged to go in there and be like, I'm just going to make myself forgive them. I'm not going to be the bad guy here holding it against them. Because the thing is, when the abuse is still going on and you grew up with this, you need more than anything to have a boundary on it, You need a way to not just have a physical boundary where she doesn't get to talk to you like that. You can hang up the phone or get away from her. But you have a psychological boundary where you're like, here comes her crazy statements again, her little narrative. It's not true. It's not me. Like that's your mental and psychological boundary, and you need that. So I would not worry right now about trying to talk yourself out of feeling hurt and angry about this. I don't want you to have your life run by anger, but I'm not hearing that here. You're telling me very matter of fact. She wrote a group message, like a text to you and your fiance, and now you're dysregulated. So you asked me for a reality check. This is where I had trouble keeping a straight face. Hi, Sam and Rose. I hope you're both doing well and that wedding planning is going smoothly. Very appropriate, Mom. That sounds like what moms say. I wanted to wait until all the tests were done and an indefinite diagnosis was confirmed, but I also didn't want to regret not saying my goodbyes just in case. Oh my gosh. So, all right, I wasn't her doctor, but you're saying you're quoting her. I've been suffering persistent, painful headaches and dizziness going on day 6 now. Okay. So she's had a headache for 6 days and some dizziness. And now she has to write to you and go, because I might be dying. I'm sorry, but headaches and dizziness have 100 other reasons they could be there. This is high drama, histrionics. And she had it for going on day 6 now, in which she was bedridden in the first 3 days. Yeah, that sounds like when I had COVID and then again when I had a cold recently. Okay. Urgent care doctor wanted to rule out stress versus brain tumor or aneurysm in the head. Well, a bad headache. So, yep, you got an MRI tomorrow. Meanwhile, my symptoms persist while I'm working more hours to support 3 dev teams. Okay, so here's the poor suffering mom. All I'm going through, I just need to tell you. And this is her, like, congratulations. I hope wedding planning is going well. Not really. You said later, is this a cry for help? It sure is. It's a cry for pity. Okay, it's so hard for her. I'm sorry. It's just so irrational for her to announce that she might be saying her goodbyes. Just in case. It just makes me mad. I'm sorry. I don't usually like let myself be so like contemptuous, but it makes me mad, Rose, that she treated you that way, that she allowed the abuse, and then she gives you this BS. Okay, Rose, she says, I'd said that I couldn't go back in time to undo the hurts that I had unintentionally caused you in your childhood for doing what I thought was right at the time, given what I had and could. I had attempted to correct my actions and responses, but they weren't good enough nor acceptable. This is so like, this just bothers me so much. But you wouldn't let it be good enough that I denied everything. I can't go back in time and change it. That's not an apology. Rose, I'm just going to say what you deserve to hear from your mom. Oh my God, honey, I am so sorry that I didn't listen to you and believe you and act on it the minute you told me what was happening. That was a terrible thing that happened to you. It never should have happened, and it was my responsibility to stop it from happening. I failed you. I'm so sorry. I know that it made a huge negative difference in your life and hurt you. And right now, I just want you to know that I'm here to hear you and care about you and support you in any way I can to heal from this. I hope you can forgive my terrible, terrible behavior. Rose, that's what you deserve to hear. This is just bullshit. I'm sorry what she's saying here. What I did for you was never good enough nor acceptable. Blaming you like it's like you just withheld acceptance for her from this non-apology. Hence we are where we are now. No, that's not why you are where you are right now. You're where you are right now is because she let you be abused. And she didn't believe you, and she continues to treat you in this manipulative manner now. You say, that's where we are now, a total disconnection, because you wouldn't accept it. It just bothers me. Nevertheless, I will always love you and forgive everything that was said and done that brought me heartaches and sadness. Okay. All right, there it is, okay? What a wonderful mom. She will forgive you for all that you did to bring her heartache and sadness. Wow. All right. Okay, now here's a classic narcissist mom move. I'm just going to say, I can't diagnose, but this is it. Now, Sam, on the other hand, the man, you are an extraordinary, loving, and caring, considerate human being the best I've ever met in my entire life. And I'm so thankful and proud that you're going to be my future son-in-law. My. Okay. You will be a wonderful husband to Rose and an amazing father. Thank you for making our lives so joyful. I will never, it's just like a script she's following. What is the mother of the bride supposed to say? And it's all, blah, 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 blah. And I assume Sam loves you and is a good person. And Sam sees through this. And Sam is not here to bring joy to her. And Sam has your back. Love always, Mom. Yep. I've always loved you and celebrated you as the son I wish to have. Okay. It must, you didn't say anything, but it hurt me on your behalf that she just put you down so badly, but then he got all the praise. But whatever. That's what people like her do. That's what they do. That's what she has to do to keep a wall of denial up around what she did. And I can only imagine like the shame and guilt that a person feels if they know on some tiny little level underneath all that BS that they allowed their child to be abused in such a terrible way, and that they covered it up, they lied, they didn't believe the child, they just had to have the man, right? Rose, then you said, my gut tells me this is a cry for attention. Yes, your gut is good, your gut is telling you right. But I have a hard time trusting my perception. Your perception is good, Rose. Trust your perception. She wants attention. That's what people like her do. To me, the message felt unapologetic. Yep. Guilting. Yep. Blame shifting. Exactly. And manipulative. Yes, yes, yes. I hope your therapist is helping you with this. I would appreciate your take on this and your suggestions on how to proceed. If you decide to have her at your wedding, and I say if, because I think that this I'm not like somebody who goes in and goes, you really need to get people out of your life. You need to do that. It's up to you. It's up to you whether you want her at the wedding. But just know there's going to be more of this and it's going to accelerate close to the wedding. Here's you getting together with like a good guy and all her feelings about like who she had and she got denied. The knives are going to be out. All right. That's what I predict. And is that really what you want for your wedding? Of course, if you tell her she can't come, obviously, the knives are going to be out and all this pressure is going to come. But what some people do when they have an abusive parent like this is they cut off contact and block them so the person can't contact them through something. And yes, there would be hell to pay forever. Okay, option B is you let her come and then you come up with what I call ninja boundaries for how to not let her affect your day. And that means she cannot have time with you before the wedding. I mean, especially I would say that week before the wedding, like no contact, she can come. When you set ninja boundaries, the best thing you can do with an abusive person is keep it so subtle that they don't even know you're doing it. Because a person like her, if she knows that you're trying to set boundaries, it implies a criticism of her and what's she going to do about that. You know what she's going to do. She's going to threaten to kill herself, or she's going to come out and tell you what a terrible person you are and how much you've hurt her. All right? Just flip, flop, blame, attack, manipulate. Or these like, this is what I'm guessing, is this whole medical thing where she had a headache for 6 days and now she's dying. It sounds like maybe you were already trying to set a boundary and she had to crash the gates. Is that what happened? Am I guessing right? So, you know what? If she has a brain tumor and is dying, it still doesn't give her the right to come in and treat you badly. So you do not have to pick up the phone or look at texts or emails. You get to have a boundary. And so a way that you can do that gracefully with an abusive person is just say, oh, I'm so sorry. You know, I'm not going to have time to hang out before the wedding. I wish I could, but I can't. But I'll see you there. We've got a very nice seat reserved for you and da-da-da. Then you enlist friends who are not in the wedding party, who know what's going on and who can help you, who care enough about you to try to shepherd her away from you, to let you have your good day, to just let you have your good day. And then I want you to, don't worry about forgiving her, forgetting her. What I want you to like put all your energy into is letting go of any guilt or sense of responsibility that you have to keep her from harming herself or keep her from feeling bad. I feel like you're doing pretty well, but I just want to give you 100% permission. That's the way. That's what I'm recommending, okay? Just do not give this woman any energy. And it's funny because when somebody is playing this game with you, sometimes you can just sort of say, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so worried. I hope that MRI goes good. Yeah, let us know how it goes. And then just get off the phone. You just say the thing that's going to make them be quiet and get out of there. Don't give them your time and your mental attention where they can get in and hurt you. All right? I hope that helps. I'm really sorry. I hope Sam is amazing for you. I hope this is a new chapter in your life where you get to turn the page. You certainly have my blessings to cut her out of your life and block contact. And you're probably only the second person I've ever said that to on this channel. I'm always like the champion of like keeping open channels, but she doesn't sound to me like somebody who's ever going to get it. So for you to be happy, if there ever comes a day when you can tolerate somebody acting like this without it like grabbing you by the head and sucking you back down into that bad place where you think you're no good and you don't deserve to be cared for, it's not worth it, okay? It's not worth it. This does not sound like somebody capable of looking at herself. There has never been a time when thinking clearly and thinking for yourself have been more important than they are right now. But some people shout and punish you for even thinking something that they don't agree with. And I call these people opinion bullies. And if you've experienced abuse and neglect in childhood, you may be especially vulnerable to being controlled by them emotionally and psychologically, and sometimes even physically and financially. With childhood PTSD, it's all too common that we end up losing ourselves around other people, especially people with strong personalities and strong opinions. It's okay that people have strong opinions, but with us, we get around that and we often feel we have to go along with those opinions, or we go silent even when we disagree, or we lose track of what we believe just by being around someone else's beliefs. So some areas where this comes up, as you know, are in families, in dating relationships and marriages, with coworkers, with classmates, your neighbors, even strangers on social media, well, especially strangers on social media. Everywhere you go, people are going to have different points of view. But what we're seeing in the place of friendship and curiosity is a steep rise in the prevalence of opinion bullies. And let's define that as people with an extreme belief that their opinion is the only right one. And frankly, it's a narcissistic sense of entitlement to not just tell you about their opinion, but to demand that you agree. It's a nightmare, right? It's especially a nightmare for people who had childhood trauma. It feels very threatening. A lot of people are confused and hiding out of fear where all this bullying is leading, even people who never had trauma. So for traumatized people, this can be paralyzing. It can totally shut you down, and that's not good. What happens is, with that fuzzy zone around holding your own opinions or your own agenda around people who are being intense and authoritative, you can go deep into a cptsd survival reaction. Just get through this, don't say a word, smile, agree, go along with their bullying behavior. But in that intensified pressure, you may be tempted to go along with their hurtful actions, like slandering other people behind their back and online without the least idea whether this trash talk is even true. And you end up hurting other people and hurting yourself. And it feels horrible, or it ought to. And yet this fear of expressing your own opinion is not some phobia. You're not imagining that there could be real consequences to sticking your neck out and thinking for yourself in this particular moment. So let's acknowledge there is risk and that it takes courage to be yourself and not fall into helplessness around other people's opinion bullying and what is, in effect, narcissistic attempts to control you and take your power to increase their own power. So I'm going to tell you 5 things you can do to strengthen yourself so that you don't lose yourself when you're under pressure to fit in with opinion bullies. You don't necessarily have to argue with them. You can still keep quiet, but if you're going to do that, it's really important that you're making that choice that's true to yourself and not just erasing yourself like so many of us have done in the past. So this strength to keep being yourself in situations where you don't feel accepted or safe will serve you in 1,000 ways as a person who is healing from past trauma. You're learning not to disappear, not to abandon yourself around people who are louder or angrier or more pushy than you. In fact, it can be dangerous to check out when you're around this kind of person. This is one of the big ways abuse can happen. You surrender, you give up, you attach yourself to people and replace your own perception with whatever they're telling you. Not all bullying is at that level of abuse, but all bullies are a drag. And the skills I'm about to teach you will help you to get through your contact with them without getting enraged or forcing yourself to be silent or changing into some version of yourself that's not really you. Now it took me years of healing to even see how fragile I was around opinion bullies. What made me susceptible to them was, for one, needing them, or thinking I did, when sometimes I needed them for a paycheck or, have you ever had a boss or coworker like this? I'd get around people like this and it was like taking a terrible drug that anesthetizes you into paralysis, where I couldn't speak or move. And I just feel terrible inside and terrified to say anything. People have to really matter to you to get you to conform to something that repulses you. Either it's your livelihood, or it's your only social support, or you're under threat of some kind. And there are plenty of times and places where people had to go along or be killed, right? But there's a subtler form where it's implied that you are going to lose your job or you'll get socially destroyed in some way if you speak up. Now, I know a lot of you are thinking right now about all the political drama of recent years, and I'm going to ask you right now, if you comment, please don't name any particular person or idea in particular. We can talk about this issue without taking sides or even showing what side we're on these issues. It's really about, it's about the phenomenon of holding our own in the presence of opinion bullies, and everyone has to learn how to do that. I happen to know the people who come to this channel for support have the full spectrum of beliefs and opinions, which is beautiful and right. And we can get some healing around the social trauma of all this division and find peace with people having differences of opinion. Peace. In fact, this is good practice, and I wish all the opinion bullies out there would hear this. Always assume that people with different beliefs are in the room and conduct yourself accordingly. People who have a different point of view than you, might not feel that they're safe to speak up in your presence. So you might think everybody thinks the same thing, but that's almost never true. And how I learned this was by struggling away in life with this very problem. I didn't like it. I don't like it. I used to get sick with fear and stress around it. But I'll tell you, when it comes to bullies who try to take my power away, I've been hurt before, but just as much I've hurt myself because I got scared and surrendered my power preemptively all by myself. And there was part of me that was too fragile and scared to stand on my own or to face how they might act if I expressed myself. I didn't have confidence in what I thought either. I feared that I'd be abandoned if I were honest or if I didn't tightly control everything I said. And I hate that feeling. The more I heal from trauma, the less I can tolerate shutting myself down like a self-hating little chameleon. When you let opinion bullies cause you to shut down inside, notice the morally uncomfortable feeling that's there. It feels gross. It requires that you dumb down. It feels like poison. And I remember doing this all the time. And I've been asking myself, how much have I changed? And how did I do that? And it was kind of a process. It's still a process going on, but progress in not losing myself, not transforming into a fake self around opinion bullies began when my cptsd healing began. It's not really a coincidence, I know. Healing makes faking stop working. Does that make sense? Healing makes faking stop working. So what can you do? You can strengthen yourself. You can strengthen the boundaries around who you are while still being curious and flexible about what you believe. You can get stronger in this area just like you get stronger physically. You do it by exercising, by practicing. Childhood trauma stopped us from doing that, but now it's time to start again. So here are the 5 things that you can do to build that strength that allows you to keep being yourself and knowing what's true, even in the presence of people who are bullying you with their opinions. All right, 1, you start by telling the truth. Maybe not directly to the people around you. It's not always the time and place. But you do it to a trusted friend who accepts you and say it to yourself. Say it. Write it down. Start practicing articulating what you know to be true, what you believe to be true. You can sit in the car or in the bathroom, if you have to, and whisper what you know and believe. Make a habit of declaring and recording your true thoughts and feelings. This is part of your healing, to develop your individuality and to know yourself. The second way to resist opinion bullies, and let me explain why it's relevant, is to strengthen your capacity to pay attention. Now, when your childhood trauma is up and your triggers are activated, it's totally normal to be in a brain fog. But people in this state very easily just kind of walk into trouble. We can't see the red flags. We can't feel the vibe that something's not right. And so even if no one is trying to control you, you can get easily entangled with someone whose agenda is stronger than yours. Now, learning to stay present like that is a lifelong process, but it's one you can start this minute. For one thing, you can learn my daily practice. Those are techniques. You can learn them free. It's a free course, and I always put the link down in the description section. It's there, daily practice. It's also on the free tools page of my website, which is also linked. I make it just like I sort of like flood you, like check out this daily practice. And you can learn how to calm your mind and get clearer about who you are, what's real, what is your purpose. The third thing you'll need is to strengthen your ability to connect with other people. When you're disconnected and isolated is when you are most vulnerable and least perceptive about the nature of other people's intentions. So with cptsd, there's almost always an injury to our ability to connect, to form an authentic two-way connection with other people. And it leaves us lonely, and it leaves us too open to coercion from controlling people. Connected people, on the other hand, can see red flags, and connected people are not afraid to get away from controlling or abusive people. Okay? The fourth thing you'll need is to recover your sense of autonomy and self-determination. Traumatized people don't usually have that at first. When we're in the trauma, it feels like everything just happens to us. And sometimes that's true. We're genuinely helpless. But most of the time, we actually do have agency. We have choices. What's holding us back is usually fear. Fear that we're going to end up alone and that we have to do whatever anyone asks of us so that they'll stay with us. And this fear is paralyzing and is exactly where we can be preyed upon by abusers. So finally, the fifth thing is to practice leading each day with your own agenda. And this means basically having a life and setting your intentions for yourself about the ways you're trying to heal and expand your life. And when you're doing these 5 things, the power of bullies gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And that's how I realized how much I was controlled, not really by bullies so much as my own idea of what other people wanted. And in effect, I was controlled by me. So it's a big deal as a person with cptsd to heal and grow to the point that you don't seek out people who can define who you are, which is what control is. You can deprogram yourself from the reality you knew as a kid when other people really were causing your problems and other people really were the only people who could solve them. But now it's you. You're free and you have agency, and developing this doesn't always happen overnight. But you can make progress a little bit each day. Narcissists have this devious way of sneaking up on you and injecting problems and self-doubt into your life. And it's almost like they put a spell on you. And people tell me this over and over again, that it can take a long time to finally realize that you are not causing all the pain and chaos that they're bringing into your life. That you're not a bad person or some kind of loser who's so bad that you can't even see how you're causing these problems. Because the truth is, they are causing the problems. You're probably not the only person in their orbit who's hurting and attacking themselves. But when the day comes that you finally can see the truth, that this person is selfish and fickle and messing with you just to keep their ego afloat, and you set a boundary, well, look out. Because yes, while this will break the spell, temporarily at least, for you, the resulting abuse that narcissists tend to unload is going to be aimed at you. And this is when the temptation to fall back into subservience to them and into self-attack are going to kick in. So my letter today is from a woman I'll call Sibel. And she writes, "Dear Anna, I'm now struggling with a lot of anger and frustration because lately I understood, with the help of my therapist and my good friend, that one of my colleagues has been abusive to me for almost 5 years. My therapist suggested that this colleague may have borderline personality disorder. But the question is, how is it possible that I haven't noticed that there was something wrong with her and I let her abuse me verbally and emotionally for so many years?" I've got this fairy pencil here. I'm going to circle things I want to come back to on a second reading, but let's read through just to see what Sibel is telling us. What's the story here? She says, "I can understand that I was focused on surviving, but I was always letting her back into my life. It's so out of my character. I usually get rid of people who hurt me immediately. More likely that I would get rid of somebody too early rather than too late. And I lost so many good people this way. But she stuck with me and poisoned my life for half a decade." Wow. "At first, she tried hard to be my friend. I was at her job interview, and she always told me I made such a good impression on her. I have to admit that she became the friend I needed at the time. I felt very lonely and wounded after being bullied in my previous workplace. What's more, we were both immigrants, so it felt like we had many things in common. Later, we started hanging out outside work, and we shared some of our personal stories. We both grew up in dysfunctional homes. I had a narcissistic father, and she was abandoned by her alcoholic mother. After this nice start, she was only criticizing me. She constantly told me that I was a negative and toxic person and that I needed to work on myself. And you know, it landed on the proper ground, as I am always depressed. And she told me these things to, quote, help me so I would understand what I needed to change. I believed her because she was so optimistic and vibrant. I thought people liked her, but then she had these bad days. And when it was her bad day, it was everybody's bad day. I love that. Did you make that up? That is just brilliant. When it was her bad day, it was everybody's bad day. Sometimes when I came to work sleepy or just tired, she'd get mad at me because I brought negative energy. She claimed that she would feel my constant mood swings because she was so sensitive and affected by my negativity. She loved spirituality, personal growth, and quoting famous people, and she wanted good vibes only. I thought something was profoundly wrong with me, and she was the only generous person trying to help me, but I was never good enough and could never fulfill her expectations. Whenever I needed some distance from her, she would immediately stop talking to me, and she started hanging out with somebody else to show me how popular she was. Then she would be passive-aggressive or even openly aggressive. I'll never forget this situation when we met at our colleagues' dinner after many weeks of the silent treatment. She started asking people what their zodiac signs were. She could tell something nice about each sign, of course, but when it was my turn, she said Gemini is the most two-faced, unstable zodiac sign, and nothing good can come out of it. She said it so viciously that I can't forget it. Then after a few days, she would start talking to me as if nothing had ever happened, and we were friends again. She was constantly afraid I was gossiping because I was taking a coffee break with somebody else. She said once, "I don't know what you're talking about with that guy," and she was calling me a gossip girl because people liked me. She was talking negative stuff about anyone who was hanging out with me. When she asked me what this or that person said, I would say something like, "Oh, you know, he's having a bad time," or "she needed to talk." This would set her off. I felt like she was punishing me by keeping secrets. And I think it was revenge for the fact that I refused to tell her stuff about other people. So when I went back to college, she signed up for college too. When I mentioned that I would take time off at the end of August, guess what? In 2 hours, I would get a message from our boss that she took some time off at the end of August. I felt like I was in never-ending competition with her, even if I didn't know what this competition was about and what the rules were. On the one hand, she was thanking me for teaching her everything at work. On the other, it felt like she hated the fact that I was better at work. Every now and then, she would give me the silent treatment for no reason. For some reason, it would happen each September, plus some extra occasions across the year. The first years, I tried to do everything to regain her friendship. Then I changed my tactics and I just let her be. But I felt that the tension was rising each day. At the end of this cycle, she'd take me to a small conference room at the office and pour all the crap on me. In the first years, I'd apologized and felt crap for a few days after. Only 2 years ago, I defended myself this one time. I said she was the gossiper and the manipulator, and everyone feels like walking on eggshells around her. And then I added something like, "I don't care what you think about me. You don't need to hang out with me, and we don't need to talk ever again. I don't care." And then she started crying and apologizing and said she had a tough time. I forgave her. I felt sorry for her, so I even hugged her and said that everything would be all right, and she never took me to a conference room again. But the silent treatment was repeated a few more times. All this time, I thought I deserved her unacceptable treatment. 6 months ago, she was relocated overseas. I was happy and anxious, but still happy. My other colleagues told me she sucked at work, and nobody wanted to work with her apart from me. Nobody came to her goodbye party either. Maybe I'm crazy to think that, but coincidentally, she came to visit us last month. She stayed here a week. That was my last week in this company. I feel that it was her final attempt to get me because she heard I was leaving for good. Of course, there were some silly excuses for her to have a business trip, but frankly, it was nothing she couldn't do from overseas. And why I think she did it on purpose, because I believe she lived in some alternative reality. She applied different rules to her life. She was fighting imaginary fights with imaginary enemies. There were no limits for her to take revenge, so I wouldn't be surprised if she convinced the managers that she needed to come back for that 1 week. I was her friend, so I knew her secrets too, but that was the moment when I took control, and I totally ignored her presence at the office. I was proud of myself. I regret so many things that happened between us. Why couldn't I just let her be? I lost my time and energy trying to fix the relationship with her. She took a lot of happiness from me. Now I'm losing my time ruminating. Yeah. Also, now I see that I lost many valuable friendships at that workplace because I was so focused on her. I have many regrets now, and I don't know how to convince myself that I did the best I could. because I didn't. There were 120 other people at that office to hang out with, and I still focused on the most toxic person there. Is there a way to make sure that the next time I will focus on the right people? Next week, I'm starting in a new place. I don't want to end up with a crazy maker ever again. Thank you. Okay, Sibel. What a story. I'm so glad you're out. This is great. I have a feeling you're going to do very well. I have a feeling you're going to do very well, that I hear a lot of healing in how you describe this, a lot of recognition. You don't sound like somebody kind of stuck in this story anymore, but I get it. It's hard to process, like, why did I do this? So let's just break this down. Okay. You have a therapist. Great. And your therapist thinks this is borderline personality disorder. And I don't have a license to diagnose. Your therapist does. And so that's sort of intriguing to me. I thought it sounded a little more like something else, like narcissism. It sounds pretty classic to me, but who knows? I'm always telling everybody, diagnosing people, whatever, because it doesn't really matter what you call it. What matters is how it affects you and what you're going to do about it to change your life and stop being suppressed and oppressed by people who treat you like that. That is the thing. So I think we're all in agreement. Yeah, this was not good. So you're just wondering, how did it take you so long? So you said in here that first of all, you were both immigrants, and also that you came from a dysfunctional family. You had a narcissistic father, and that's the deal, Narcissist parent primes you to be able to tolerate narcissists in later life. That's the deal. It creates a certain kind of dynamic. Sometimes it's codependent. I think that's a little bit what you're describing here, but you're describing something more. And it's just a weird way that you were crap fitting to this, where she would accuse you, you would believe it. She would get her, feeling of being good and accomplished by putting you down. And you guys kept going like that. You would just keep donating your energy and self-worth to her, to the bottomless pit of her need, of her demand for your supply, of self-esteem, of confidence, of knowledge. And she reminds me of some people I've encountered with the sort of positive, positive thinking, spirituality, all that stuff, the optimistic and vibrant thing. A lot of people call this toxic positivity. And I remember when I first heard that, I was like, how could positivity be toxic? It's so helpful to be positive. Well, compared to what I had been through, it was positive. But I've totally encountered this. There's, actually, in some of the circles that I overlap with in the Venn diagram of what's on YouTube, of self-help, there's just you can do it. You just have to believe in yourself and all of this goes away. And, I'm kind of, sometimes I have people help me with my YouTube channel or my content. And I'm always here's the thing about us, bad stuff actually did happen and we have to be sensitive to that. And so it just always strikes me as, it has its good side, but it can have this just totally fake, manipulative, yes, narcissistic side to it. And what I have noticed about it, you didn't say this about her, but what I've noticed about it is people who are into the toxic positivity, there's often kind of an addiction to cult-like figures and debting, just because there's kind of that belief, if you just spend more money on this, you're going to have more of it. So it kind of goes along as sort of a package with a lot of stuff that seems pretty dysfunctional to me. But that said, it's not, that's just baby with the bathwater. There is so much to be gained by, learning from people who teach you how to rethink things. I wouldn't be where I am if I hadn't been taught by, certain figures and leaders who teach you how to change how you see that. I used to feel quite defeated. I used to feel very limited by my trauma. So I get the attraction. And I was able to turn that around. A key moment for that was when I was participated in an exercise with a ton of people when I was deciding I was going to do Crappy Childhood Fairy. And the one big fear holding me back is that people would be mean to me online. And I was in this exercise where we just shouted out loud, people are going to give me hate mail. Yay. That means I'm in the game, and it was this good moment. So there's good to that. And I can see why you're attracted. And because you're kind of prone to depression, you didn't really talk about this, but I think that being an immigrant and being in a new place, I mean, you've obviously, I I don't even know what you do for a living, but why do I get the feeling like you got a lot going for you here? You got a lot going for you, but you would be a stranger in a strange land and trying to figure things out. And of course, like, good for you for just pursuing things that were positive, optimistic, forward thinking. But with the narcissist dad, yeah, the person you picked had this downside, this very, very downside of them, where she flipped on you. And I think that's where your therapist thought borderline flipped on you, where it's all about, hey, believe in this great thing, and then takes out all this crap on you. I don't know if she idealized you. She idealized somebody, out there, but then she devalues you, this total devaluation where she tears you apart in the conference room. And you felt like you deserved it. And that's what you were primed to do as a kid. So not your fault, not your fault. You keep asking, like, how could I do that? But you have this really nicely developed, like, I've got it together. Why am I letting this happen? It's like, because your childhood trauma is haunting you a little bit. It happens to everybody. And your awareness is very sharp right now. You feel it, you see it, you're doing something about it. You are going to be okay. You are going to get through this. You're on a good path. So every time you tried to get some distance from her, she'd immediately stop talking to you. So there's like the manipulative trauma bond behavior, I shun you, I won't talk to you, I gossip about you. And then the nasty astrological thing, I could just picture that. That should be in a movie. It's almost like a comedy, of just a horrible person just sitting there going, but your astrological sign is just SHIT, It's funny from the outside, but I imagine it was hard at the time and you were in front of people. But you know what? I bet they saw it too. Well, they did. Nobody went to her going away party. That is so telling. She called you names and she would talk crap about anybody you hung out with. And then she would be angry at you because you wouldn't disclose private conversations that you had with people. That sounds really familiar to me, where that she kind of sees you as an extension of herself and you has no right to have things that are private between you and other friends, right? That totally rings a bell. What you're describing also is, it's like one of the sets of colors that people show when they were traumatized as kids. And you said, didn't she have an alcoholic mom? So, that does a number on people. And alcoholic moms are very neglectful. And as somebody who had an alcoholic mom, I can just say that sometimes, there's this phase of development where you blow your own horn because nobody ever did. And you just feel like you have to prove to everybody, look, I'm somebody, I'm great, and it's a real turnoff to everybody. And if a person has some sensitivity, they notice that and can start growing out of that behavior and into something where they feel authentically good about themselves and can sort of relax and be themselves. She doesn't sound like she's in that place right now. But luckily she's in another country and you don't have to deal with this anymore. All right, so here's where I think it started to really get to you. You went back to college, so she went to college too. You took a vacation in August, she took a vacation in August. You felt like it was a competition, but you didn't even know what the competition was about. I don't know, maybe. I know that people like that do that, but also like August is the most common time for vacations, and going to college is something that young people do, so who knows? And she thanked you for what you taught. She hated that you were better. There's a movie kind of about that loosely, a little bit related, called All About Eve, that you might want to check out sometime, about a protege who comes and just sort of destroys the person who taught her. So she took you into the conference room 2 years ago and you defended yourself. Woo! I just love this scene where you did that. She tried to pour it out and then you just gave it to her. You were like, everyone walks on eggshells. You're a gossiper. You're a manipulator. I don't care what you think about me. That's like the worst thing you can say to a narcissist. I don't even care what you think about me, right? I don't care. You don't want to hang out with me? Fine. We don't have to talk. Then she started crying and apologizing. And was it sincere? Who knows? I think people in the comments will take votes on that. But if she's a traumatized person, when everybody abandons ship on her, then it is pretty frightening. But still, she's no friend of yours, is she? So she started again with the silent treatment. I am not a fan of the silent treatment. I just did a video about it. The silent treatment is manipulative and cruel and not acceptable in a relationship that anybody intends to continue and, cherish. It's just not acceptable. So you thought you deserved it, but 6 months ago she went away. I don't think you thought you deserved it. I think that you started to rise above this when you stood up to her. So, I think you're stronger than you know. But yeah, she had different rules for her life. She was fighting imaginary fights with imaginary enemies. Bullet points from Wikipedia, narcissist, right? There were no limits for her to take revenge. So you wouldn't be surprised if she convinced, so she came back just to get you. So this is where maybe she did. I don't know. She had no other friends, right? Who knows what she was up to? But you know what? Your attitude of like, I don't even care, that is the correct one. Her actions have no meaning anymore to you. They just have no meaning. It doesn't matter because she's fighting an imaginary battle if it's with you or somebody else, who even knows. And now you've moved on to a new job. So the question is, how can you stop going for the toxic people and hold your space for the good people? And the way you do that is by what you're doing right now. You're opening up the story for input. You have a therapist. You're sharing it here on YouTube with like thousands of people. Thousands of people will watch this. Many will weigh in and talk to you about it. But to face honestly, what were the red flags that you saw? What were the conditions that made you vulnerable? I heard you say you were lonely. It was kind of what you needed. You know what I've noticed is that when we're the most lost is when we're the most vulnerable to sort of narcissistic abuse, because what we sometimes gravitate towards, and sometimes in a positive and it works out well way, is to strong leader people. People who are like, this is what we're going to do. This is your program, sort of like the army, or getting into 12-step recovery or something with a strong sponsor. It's like somebody lays out the plan and you just do what you're told. And that can be very helpful. And then the second phase of development that comes after that is where you begin to individuate again. There's actually a movie I love that's about that progression where you get told what to do and then you individuate again. And it's called The Master. Fantastic movie out there. Okay. So I wish you luck. Sibel, I think you're on a good path. I answer a lot of letters and sometimes I'm sort of imploring people. It's like, really take seriously, watch out for yourself. I think you're in a good spot. I encourage you, I don't know if you're like geographically moving or anything. So I encourage you to have a community around you of people who know what it is you're working on. Maybe people who have similar kinds of backgrounds that they're trying to resolve. You'd certainly always be welcome in our community, in our membership at Crappy Childhood Fairy. We have, a whole bunch of people who support each other here and use the tools here to get better. But it's so important as you use the tools that you choose that you have companionship with people so that you're not always just kind of off all by yourself, kind of losing the thread if somebody is manipulating you. I think it's realistic to expect that at least for some time in your life, you're going to have a vulnerability to people like that. You'll have a little bit of a blind spot. I have that with like drug addicts. You might have it with narcissists. So it's just to kind of respect that, to just go, sometimes I need guardrails, I need people, I need support to help me spot that when it's looking me in the face. Cancel culture is like a video game. I heard someone say this online about a month ago. I wish I could remember who. And I realized it's really like a video game for narcissists, where everybody in the game starts with, say, 100 points, and you win points by going around and attacking other people's reputations, just destroying them, and demanding that other people hate on those people too, and wreck their livelihood and ruin their relationships, and that you win because that makes you look important in the eyes of other narcissists who get their narcissistic supply by destroying people in this way. And I think people with cptsd are especially vulnerable to this game, either getting swept up by charismatic narcissists who lead it, or through their own narcissistic tendencies of wanting to be liked, of wanting to be right, of wanting to be accepted, even when there's a great big emptiness inside. But here's what's so complicated about that. When you're attacking other people in this game, nothing you say has to be true because no one's going to come after you. Why? Because they're terrified. This is like starting to happen on a huge scale. If anyone stands up for someone who's getting attacked, they automatically become the target too. So it's like this multiplying game. If you chime in and you help attack them, you get points. Now, who doesn't want to win at such a high stakes game? It's kind of like the mafia, which is real, or like vampires, which is a metaphor. But in essence, it's a cult, in that once you participate even a little bit, you're going to be pressured hard to keep doing it. Because there's no one that narcissists hate worse than people who leave their orbit or quit, right? That's a threat to them. So you get attacked. And for people who were traumatized as kids, that threat, that implicit threat, or that explicit actual threat, that you will lose everything, everyone will abandon you, you will be made ashamed, you will be pushed back into an impoverished and isolated existence where you came from, and you'll become the target of abuse. It is so terrifying and so coercive that you might be tempted to just do anything to make that stop. You might be tempted to go into denial about the real nature of what you're doing when you attack other people online. But it's so common, I just kind of need to address this to everybody. It's become so common for people to repeat things that aren't true online about other people. Now, they may not agree with it, but only narcissists have to destroy someone because they disagree, right? It's kind of like a crime spree. Once you get started, you kind of have to keep going. It gets harder and harder to stop, and the cost of stopping gets higher and higher. And your thinking, I imagine, gets more and more distorted, and the strength to do anything about it is just draining out of you. So first, I just want to say that by cancel culture, I'm not referring to the legitimate bringing to light or prosecution of someone who's committed a crime. That's real. And though there's often a cult around that too, that's meant to protect the abuser and weaken anyone's power to call it out, it does have to be called out. And there's a way to call that out through the law. But cancel culture is not about crimes per se. It's about vague things you can't really put your finger on and you can't prove, but you can say. You can say, and it has great power. And it's essentially perceived differences in values, in opinions, in your identity, in your affiliations with things. And so basically narcissists who play this game are thinking, you're not like me, then you are evil. I'm good. Everyone with differences from me is evil unless they exist to make me look like a good person, which they can do if you can make them the target of a cancel, right? And increasingly, the narcissists who play this game, they don't even care. Everybody knows this stuff isn't true, but people say it and repeat it anyway. Why? Because everyone knows the rules now. If you stand up, you get attacked. That is what the cancel culture narcissist wants because that is their supply. They need people to fall into their traps and to be ruined, and that gives them energy. Okay? So I got a letter a couple weeks ago from a fan who is really struggling right now, who's in a horrible state of anxiety because they had the courage recently to exit the cult of cancel culture. And they saw my video, How to Stand Up to Opinion Bullies, and I'll link that below. But it prompted them to open up to me something they were very ashamed of. And it's that they participated for a long time with a group of people who systematically went around and actively sought to destroy the reputations of real people. People they knew in person, people in their institutions, and people online. And so the person who wrote me told me this. And they said that they fell in with this group of friends and it operated kind of like a gang. They were seeking people they could cancel. They weren't just like happening to notice something that offended them. They were looking for people they could cancel. And my letter writer said, at first, participating felt like they were doing something really good, that these extreme accusations might not be true, but they were necessary. They were in the right spirit to stop some sort of greater evil from happening in the world. The person who wrote to me had come into this group of friends believing that they were really going to stop and they were going to protect innocent people who would otherwise be harmed. And I think that's how all narcissistic cults get started, right? It might be false, it might be wrong, but it's because we're actually so wonderful that we're saving the world and we have to do this, and the ends justify the means. We've seen this again and again in history. Now, most people who participate in this kind of thing are under the influence of a charismatic leader. They might know the leader personally and there's a big group identity, or they might just be following this person online, just looking desperately for anything that sounds powerful, that sounds like it could lift up their lives into something more meaningful. That's what they're looking for, meaning, belonging. They want to be less depressed. They want to be more important. It's what everybody wants, but how do we get it, right? Now, a lot of people don't feel they have those things, that meaning and that source of steady happiness. And there are, resentful narratives all around us and always have been in every culture in the world. In one era and place, it's the Catholics, it's the Jews, it's black people, it's white people, it's the rich people, it's the poor people. It's our human nature that we have some deep wiring that makes it possible for us to hate. And especially when we get worked up as a group, we can really start hating groups as a group, or hate individuals as a group. You know, the pitchforks come out. And if nothing stops it, it's like a train that's on a slight downslope and it has no brakes. So first it starts going a little faster and a little faster and then a little faster and then a little faster, and then it's just totally too late. And you know where that train goes? It goes all the way to the bad place that we've seen a couple times in the last century. Hate is contagious. Hate can't stop itself when no one stands up for it. And so I'm making this video to encourage everybody, if you find yourself participating in cancel culture, I'm going to just ask you, can you stop? Can you stop? Because everything good depends on every individual making a commitment not to go down those tracks. I was just in Berlin, and my son and I were going around learning a little more deeply about Berlin history and what happened there. It wasn't that long ago. It was pretty easy for a majority of people to flip into this mindset that they either went along with the narcissistic cult, or they put their heads down and didn't say anything against it. Now, human psychology is weak, and sometimes, and the power of malignant narcissists just gathers momentum. And when no one stands up, it is a runaway train. It takes everything out in its path. So we are no exception. This generation is not special. We are not endowed with some special divine exemption from the way things have gone in history for humankind. So my letter writer said that at first participating in canceling others didn't seem like it would get bad in any way. And they said it was like a high, actually, and it took a lot of courage for them to admit that they actually, had a good feeling about it. It made them feel like they were in the right, like they were good, like they were someone on a mission, like everybody wants to be on a mission. And it helped them feel, instead of worse than everybody, it helped them feel a little better than everybody, because they were on this mission to save the world. But they didn't feel good. As things turned out, they had a lot of shame about what they'd done. And they told me that after a little while, that high, they started to come down. They had to keep participating in the canceling of people to try to get back that good feeling, like a drug addiction. It's like an addiction. And then it got still worse than that, where they had to keep participating or their friends would turn their destruction on them. So first it was peer pressure, and then it was something even worse than that, more like coercion and also like addiction, like having no choice. Keep it going, keep up the lie, keep upping the ante and saying more and more outrageous things to more and more innocent people, or you would be next. But my letter writer hit a limit one day, and I'm proud of them. They got out. They cut all ties with the people who were doing this. They became very isolated, and they were scared, but their conscience wouldn't let them turn back. They knew it was wrong to participate, and that's why I'm not even telling you their gender. I'm not telling you their name. I'm keeping them so anonymous because they are vulnerable now to this group of people coming after them online. And at first, they could see that canceling people was wrong, but they couldn't really see the truth of the people who had been hurt. And they told me that gradually they could see that the targets of the attacks weren't really anything like what they'd been portrayed as in these attacks. So my letter writer described what it was like to gradually awaken to this horrifying truth, that not only were the attack claims they made unfair, they were insane. They were just completely made up. It was imagined. And then it got more vicious, and the thought of getting out became harder and harder because eventually, it's going to require facing what you've done, and that's painful. But I'm telling you, as somebody who's done things that hurt other people, as soon as you become aware of it, the sooner you can stop, and the sooner you stop, the less horrible it's going to be. There's never going to be like a better time. Putting it off is never going to make it easier. Coming clean and stopping is going to involve some shame and facing something hard, but it also is accompanied with this wave of comfort and relief because you're finally getting free of the evil wave that's been passing over you. And so yes, there's some fear that people are going to come after you, but I don't think that's unrealistic, but I don't think it's a reason to stop. So after my letter writer got out, they were trying to just kind of like lay low, fly below the radar for a while. Now, did this person feel happy and great right now? Yes and no. Yes, because they had made the decision to stop participating in evil. But my letter writer was going through anxiety too, knowing how bad people can be out there and suddenly becoming very anxious that they would be targeted, not necessarily by that group of people, but by the world in general, by all the trolls out there, if they so much as spoke online or liked a comment on Facebook or said the wrong thing at work. And there was a feeling that their former friends were someone listening all the time, hanging over them, just waiting to pounce at the slightest move, to cancel them. They were afraid to write or work or leave their home or send me this letter. And I'd have to say this feeling sounds familiar. And you know what it sounds like? It sounds like PTSD. To have immobilizing fear that people are going to come after you just for being yourself, just for feeling a certain way, just for opening your mouth, right? And it sounds at first like you're being paranoid, but are you? I don't think so, because in cancel culture, the old gang really can come back after you. And if it's not them, it can be other cult members. We could call these flying monkeys. That's narcissism world jargon for, the helpers of the narcissist who come after and do the bad thing to them. They're still addicted to the game. Maybe they're narcissistic abusers. Maybe they're hostages of those narcissists. Either way, it's time for all decent and fair people, and especially people with cptsd who need to be in that good feeling in order to heal from past trauma. It's time for us to stand up to dismantle this game. So how do we do that? First, we stop participating in the public shaming of anyone who stands accused of something that we have not, A, personally witnessed, or B, that we haven't done our due diligence to verify. From multiple sources, not just some sort of media thing, not something potentially dishonest, but to really verify, is the accusation true? Have you heard some other points of view about this? Is it nuanced? It almost always is. If you don't have those conditions, don't repeat the negative story. Verify it. And if you find that you must say something, especially online or in some public way, use the advice of Socrates and ask yourself, is it true? Is it kind? And is it necessary? And most of what you hear against others is not those things. It's outrage. You've heard the phrase outrage porn, okay? It's the same sort of thing. It's an addictive high. And make no mistake, it's not just there to drive ratings. It drives ratings because it divides. And if you do one thing for your community, be a healer of divisions. Do not be a divider. You do this by staying open-minded, by keeping your heart open. Now, you've heard my analogy about the front porch. You don't have to let everybody into your heart, but you can listen to them. And I talk about the metaphor. Let them stand on the front porch and tell you their opinion, and you can listen. You can take what you like and leave the rest. But you don't have to either let them all in or destroy them. That is black and white thinking, and that is trauma thinking, all right? So you can ask yourself, why do I even want to casually repeat this attack on another person, or on an organization, or a government office, or a country, or a leader, or an ethnic group, or any kind of person out there? What do I get out of slandering them? Now, if we're honest, what we get is a little hit of false self-esteem. False self-esteem, the kind you get out of, putting down others. It's kind of like crack. It's a high that's very cheap. It does terrible damage to people who use it and to everybody around them, and it doesn't last. So with complex PTSD, anything that lifts us up, that focuses our minds, is tempting. Lashing out can feel like empowerment, when really it's just dysregulation. I suspect a lot of people doing the cancel game out there are traumatized from childhood. They haven't healed yet, but even if they are traumatized, it is not an excuse for the violence they're doing to the social fabric. Now, if something bothers you about the way other people live their lives, or how they think or believe, or what they say, or what you think they think, or how you believe they believe, talk to them. Read books. Read things that have a different point of view than your usual source. Find out why people have different opinions. Of course, there are occasionally people who really are up to no good, and they say terrible things, but in most cases, people just see things a little differently than you. Mostly everyone wants the same things. I've noticed this. They want the same things for themselves and their families. Most people want the same things for their communities. The difference lies in how we think those good outcomes can be achieved. People have different opinions about that. And actually, there should be different opinions about that. Nobody's ever got it perfect. And there should be different opinions, right? What's the right way to raise children? What's the right way to provide medical care for somebody? What's the right thing to do about injustice in the world? These are all things that most people want to accomplish, but how we do it is conceived in these different ways in different contexts by different people. So that people have got to work together. They've got to bring their arguments to the table and hash it out. And, in a given time and in a given place, you come up with a solution and you improve on it and you improve on it and you do it differently over here and you compare the results, and over time, we start to get this progress, all right? That's how it works. When you don't allow people to have a different opinion, that can't happen. And so whatever this is and whatever problems it has, usually consume it and suck it down into total ineffectiveness. And we've seen that again and again in history too. The answers to these problems are complicated. And if they were as simple as just doing things the way I think they should be done, they'd be solved by now. But they're not that simple. They're complicated. They are deep-rooted. They're debatable, and all progress depends not on some decree of the right thing forcing people out of their jobs, out of the public arena, but on a free-flowing stream of ideas and expression and learning and debate, and a place for people at the table who, for example, have cptsd and who get kind of rattled and dysregulated in that kind of environment. How do we participate in the conversation? We can't possibly do it with this constant threat hanging over us that we're going to be canceled. There needs to be room for everyone in this stream of information and in this stream of progress. Perfect agreement is never going to happen, and luckily it's not a requirement. And in fact, requiring that is the nature of evil itself. It's what drives cancel culture. It's the lifeblood of the narcissist, that there is one way to do things. Good orderly direction tends to arise through inclusivity and free expression. So stand up for those who are silenced. Speak up when you see injustice. Speak truthfully. Be very careful that you're staying true, and take care that your passion for truth doesn't cause you to be blinded, to make other people to see it your way. There's room for your views and room for theirs. So yes, there are costs to this. There are costs to letting everybody have a voice, but consider the alternative. This is how the best societies have flourished, and this is the kind of society that is safer for people who have been traumatized to practice using their voices and participating, moving forward along the path of healing. So if you get caught up with the canceling type, it's never too late to step back. Step back quietly at first if you have to get your head clear. Get support. If you know someone who's fallen down the hole of trashing other people, offer them a hand. Have their back. Don't judge them. Just help them out. Let them know you've been there. Speak up when other people get attacked. And I hope this never happens, but if you get attacked, speak up and say what you believe is true and right, and ask for help. When enough people get together to say the truth and to make it safe for other people to say what they need to say, it is diminished. Because you're a person who was traumatized, I invite you to have solidarity with all other people who have been traumatized. And when they say their truth, even if you don't agree with them, make space for them, all right? You can defend other people's right to speak. When we stand together in making space for that, the power of cancel culture is diminished. It makes it safe for you and for everybody else to be who they really are and to express themselves. And this is what a healthy culture looks like. And not coincidentally, what healing from trauma looks like, where every man, every woman is free to express who they really are. They might not be free to commit crimes, okay, but they can think for themselves. There's no other system in the long run that can lead to anything good. So if you're feeling hurt by this culture, if it's been affecting you, either you've been targeted, you hate listening to it, or even worse, you've fallen into it. The most powerful tools I ever found to get out of that kind of activity is the daily practice that I teach. It's a way to get free of fear and resentment, and it can be very helpful to calm complex PTSD symptoms, and especially the dysregulation that make us so vulnerable to other people.